Hello and welcome to Winchester. My name is David, I'm one of the city tour guides, and with my colleagues Dave, Pauline and Vel, we shall be giving you a taste today of what one of our wonderful tours around the city is really like. Vibrant, ancient, cultured, Winchester. And those adjectives just describe some of the residents, but Winchester itself, voted a few years ago by a leading Sunday newspaper as the most desirable place in the country in which to live. Why was that? Well, for a start, Winchester is steeped in history. The Romans were here. They called this place Venta Belgarum, and after their departure and the Dark Ages, our next visitors were the Saxons, whose most famous king, Alfred, made Winchester the capital of his kingdom, Wessex. His statue is a central point in Winchester itself and tells us a great deal about him. Just look at the statue. In his right hand he's carrying a sword. Curious that he's holding it by the blade. Why do you think that might be? And in his left hand there is a shield, a symbol of defence. Alfred transformed the city, made it a cultural and spiritual capital, and in fact founded more than 50 churches. But Winchester is not just about Alfred the Great. It is also a place of learning, and to the left of Alfred's statue, St. John's House is one of the oldest establishments in the country. Just look at the building, the windows on the second floor. Are they real? Or have they been painted on? And we are standing in Abbey Gardens. But where is the Abbey? And at the edge of the gardens is the gracious Abbey House, the official residence of the Mayor of Winchester. And on the back wall is a bell. What is that doing there? As you come to Winchester, all sorts of questions will come to mind. And if you come on one of our tours, we will be able to explore together some of the answers to those questions.
Hello, I'm Pauline. And here we are beside the famous River Itchen. It's crystal clear because it's filtered through the chalk. And it rises nearby in a village called Cheriton, and it goes all the way down to Southampton. If you're very lucky, you might be able to see some trout or salmon swimming in here. And you know, the river wasn't always here. The Romans diverted it to this route when they were here in AD 70. It's a very fast-flowing river, and if you look there, you can see the bridge over the river. This is the City Bridge, or St. Swithin's Bridge. But there was a much older bridge on that site. St. Swithin himself, then Bishop Swithin, built the bridge, and one day there's a story that he was on the bridge and a poor lady was walking across the bridge and she broke some eggs she was carrying. Now, it's said this is where one of the first of Swithin's miracles were performed, but you'll have to come along to find out more about that story. Beyond the bridge you can see the City Mill, which has been lovingly restored to an active working mill. So you can visit, you can buy flour, make your own bread, and you can also go downstairs to where the mill race is. And if you're very lucky, you may see another visitor, as sometimes they have otters there. Now, from here, we can take a beautiful stroll along the scenic riverside beside the medieval city wall. And as we go, I'd like you to take notice of the flint and the ancient stones in those walls from very old medieval buildings. And now we're going to head down to see Dave, who's at Winchester College.
Hello, my name's David and I'm one of the city tour guides here in Winchester. And I want to show you Another ancient but also contemporary institution here in Winchester, Winchester College, a world famous private boarding school. It's been operating continuously on this same site here in Winchester, and out of those original stone and flint built buildings that you can see for well over 600 years. It was founded in 1382 by the then Bishop of Winchester, Bishop William of Wykeham. Now he's buried here in Winchester Cathedral, where you can see his ornately carved chantry chapel. Now, following the Great Bubonic Plague of 1348 to 1350, which killed between 30 and 60% of Europe's entire population, Bishop William of Wykeham needed priests to replace those who had died. Now, priests appear to have suffered disproportionately more deaths, probably because they had to perform the last rites on so many souls shortly before their deaths. There were too many churches in the diocese with no incumbent priests at all. William of Wykeham founded New College, Oxford, to train priests, but of course he needed highly educated candidates to send there. That is why he established an excellent school here on his doorstep in Winchester, where he could nurture it and oversee it. From the beginning, the school enrolled scholars, those with academic promise but of limited means. This was perhaps a reflection of William of Wykeham's own humble origins. Today, the school still prides itself on the opportunities that it's able to offer in terms of scholarships and bursaries. Now, the school is so old that some of its customs and even the language that the students use amongst themselves have their origins in the Middle Ages. You can still see the vent in the roof above where, before safe running water was available, medieval small beer was brewed for the students to drink. And it continued to be brewed here until relatively recently. Who knows what the school motto is? You probably already know it. It's "Manners maketh man." It was William of Wykeham's family motto, and he lent it to his school. Nowadays, Winchester College's main focus is not on preparing young men for the priesthood. Winchester College retains its high academic, musical and sporting standards, which maintains it as one of the premier private schools in the world. If you come to Winchester, you can have a tour around the inside of the college with one of their own guides. Now, let's walk down College Street and go and see Val.
Hello, I'm Valerie and I'm going to show you a little bit about the life of Jane Austen. Who was Jane Austen, first of all? She was a novelist, and she was born in 1775, about 15 miles north of here in a little village called Steventon, where her father was the vicar. She was the seventh of 8 children, and she moved around the country and finally settled in Chawton. Her brother owned the estate, and she lived in a little house in Chawton with her mother and her sister. This was where she did most of her writing, and it is now a museum dedicated to Jane Austen. She became unwell at the age of 41, so she moved to this house, the first floor, with her sister Cassandra. Unfortunately, she moved here in May of 1817, was only here for 2 months, and then she died. The treatment did not work. At her funeral, there were only 4 people, 4 men in fact, her 3 brothers and her nephew. Her sister looked from the window. She was not allowed to go because she was a woman. Jane Austen was buried in the cathedral, not because she was famous at that point in her life, it was because of her ecclesiastical connections. 50 years after her death, her nephew put up a brass plaque in the cathedral commemorating his aunt, and then in 1900 there was a public funding to put up a window dedicated to Jane Austen. It is the most visited tomb that we have in the cathedral, and her works that you've probably heard of been made into films and into television series, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility and Emma, just to name a few. We're now going to walk round to the cathedral to meet David.
Winchester Cathedral, you're bringing me down. You just stood and watched as my baby left town. Do 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 do. Some of us may remember that pop song from the 1960s, but this building is much more than about a 1960s pop song. It is a national treasure and contains other treasures. This site has been a focal centre of Christian worship since the 600s, when the first cathedral was built. This cathedral before us today is the third one to be built on this site and dates back to shortly after the Norman conquest of 1066. And this has been a place hugely significant for royalty. William the Conqueror was here, Richard the Lionheart was crowned here in 1194. Royal weddings have happened here, most notably in 1554, the wedding between Queen Mary and Philip of Spain. That was the wedding of the century. And more recently, this has been the place where episodes of The Crown have been filmed for Netflix. If we look at the building, we notice the wonderful western facade. At the top, aloft, is the statue of St. Swithin, our local saint, and below him that window, front of which is a balustrade. It's known locally as the Fire Watcher's Window. I wonder why. What is the fire? And within the cathedral itself, there are further treasures, most notably perhaps the Winchester Bible, dating back to the 12th century, arguably the most important book, the most valuable book in the country. And there is the magnificent exhibition devoted to our Saxon rulers who reside here. And of course, from the literary point of view, the cathedral is the final resting place of our well-known novelist Jane Austen. This is a national treasure and contains other national treasures. Do come and find out more about it.
Here we are in the heart of Winchester. A stone's throw from both our ancient cathedral and our even older High Street. This is the Square. Here is an exciting mix of cultural, historic and spiritual Winchester. It's also an area which is contemporary and vibrant. A modern sculpture called Luminous Motion by Peter Freeman sits on that tree-lined path from the west end of the cathedral. It was unveiled in 2002. It was sited next to the Winchester City Museum, which was opened 100 years earlier in 1903. When it was opened, it was the first purpose-built museum in the country to be opened outside of London. Now, this museum tells the story of what we now call the city of Winchester, from early Bronze Age man to the Edwardian era. Among the fabulous exhibits is an enormous yet exquisitely crafted model of the entire city of Winchester as it would have looked during the reign of Queen Victoria. Now, it's a super museum to visit, especially with children. Come and see our famous painted traffic bollards, decorated by a consortium of local artists called the Colour Factory. They're inspired by famous paintings and artists, and taken together they create an intriguing outside art gallery. The tower you can see above the roof line belongs to St. Lawrence's Church. Now, parts of that church date back to 1150, but it was built on the site of William the Conqueror's original chapel when he had his palace on this site. And if you know where to look around here, you can still find evidence of that palace. The Eclipse Inn you can see is a pub that is as old as it looks. It used to be the rectory for St. Lawrence's Church. Come and find out who haunts it and listen to her macabre story. And do you remember, I said contemporary and vibrant? Well, Winchester has been described as the gastronomic capital of the South. It boasts more than its fair share of independent, Michelin-starred and celebrity cafes and restaurants. It's safe to say that Winchester is a great place to come if you like good food. Now, we're going to go to the High Street and we're going to see Pauline by the Buttercross.
Hello, so here we are at the 14th century Buttercross, which was refurbished in the 19th century. We're in the heart of the city, and this is located right in the middle of the oldest highway or high street in England. And if you look closely at the Buttercross, you'll see the statues of the ancient kings and saints that were important to the city of Winchester. In olden times, the people would come and sell their dairy produce on the steps, and that's why it's called Buttercross, possibly. Some people call it the City Cross. In medieval times, there was even a pub on either side of this cross, and one was called Heaven and one was called Hell. So you could choose which one you'd prefer to go to. Now, we very nearly lost the cross at one point in 1770 when there was a riot by the people of Winchester. There was a wealthy local landowner who wanted this cross for his estate called Cranberry Park. But because of the riot, the cross was saved, thank goodness. The town crier would come and make proclamations from this cross as well. This is a very vibrant part of the city where you can eat, drink and be merry, and you'll often find market stalls here. So very little has changed over the years. If you come and sit on the steps, you'll be bound to return. Come and find out more about that. Now from here, we can walk up this ancient holloway up towards the West Gate. And as you go, you'll find more about the history and the mystery of the city.
We're stood outside the beautiful Great Hall that Winchester is very proud of. It's an aisled hall. It was built on top of a Roman fortification, this being the highest part of the city here. In 1222, King Henry III came and decided he would like to renovate the Great Hall, knock the old one down and built the one that you can see today, using our local building material, which is flint. His son, Edward I, when he was here, built a round table. It was the fashion of the day. It was a big thing, round tables. But he left it unpainted. In 1516, King Henry VIII came here and decided that he would like some work done in the Great Hall, and he also decided to have the round table painted. It was painted in the style of Arthur, King Arthur, and his 24 knights. However, if you look very closely at King Arthur's face, who does it remind you of? A very young Henry VIII. He came back 6 years later in 1522 to show Charles V, the Roman Emperor. It was a case of showing off. Let me show you my beautiful Greek table. So he offered him a lavish banquet and the view of the round table. The castle remained here until 1645. Oliver Cromwell decided to knock it all down so that it would not be used as a fortification. The only part we were left with is the Great Hall. During the years, the Great Hall has been a courthouse. Some very important hearings were here. In 1603, we had Sir Walter Raleigh condemned to death and then reprieved at the last minute. And then in 1685, we had poor Dame Alice Lisle, an elderly lady who was condemned to be burnt and in the end reprieved, but she was beheaded instead. The courthouse remained until 1973, when they built the courthouse to your left, which is a new one. And inside, if you go in our Great Hall, there are lots of things to see, including the round table. You have the wedding gates by Anthony Robinson, commemorating the wedding of Prince Charles with Lady Diana Spencer. And at the back of the Great Hall, a very delightful medieval garden.
Thank you so much for joining us today in Winchester. We look forward to welcoming you back very soon indeed.